Hi, my name is Bruce Isaacs. I'm an academic working in film studies at the University of Sydney. Over the next week, I'm going to be looking at 5 iconic sequences in the cinema of Martin Scorsese, one each day. So why Scorsese? Well, there are a couple of reasons. First, there's a great exhibition coming up on Scorsese's work at ACMI in Melbourne from May 26. If you're a film fan, I'd strongly urge you to get there. Scorsese is a sort of film historian in his own right, and his commitment to unearthing film history, whether American or European, is actually astonishing and something quite admirable. Beyond the exhibition though, I suppose I want to use these sequences to talk about Scorsese's work and its contribution to American film, but also American culture. Scorsese represents something very special in the history of American cinema. His career takes us from the American art house of the early 70s, think about a movie like Mean Streets, to 3D big budget studio filmmaking with Hugo, released in 2011. In my opinion, Scorsese is the preeminent American filmmaker of the new Hollywood of the 1970s. Alongside people like Francis Ford Coppola, Robert Altman, Peter Bogdanovich, Brian De Palma, all these names that we know from the great era of American post-classical cinema, I've got Scorsese at the top of the list of filmmakers who fundamentally changed that American cinema. In the process, perhaps more so than his contemporaries, Scorsese contributed to changing the fabric of American culture. There's no grand point I'm trying to make with these movie sequences. I want to simply watch the scenes with you to give you a sense of how I experience them, how and why they've affected me over many years. Don't be concerned if occasionally I pause, or I rewind, or I jump ahead. I tend to digress. But that's part of watching movies, right? Letting your thoughts wander. And hopefully at the end of it we see where we end up. Our first film for discussion, and the first sequence we're going to look at, is from Who's That Knocking at My Door? This is early Scorsese. It's the beginning of his career, and the reason I picked this is because it actually takes us back to student days. This film was made through the mid-60s and got enormous acclaim through the festival circuit through 1968. Extremely well-received film. I'm more interested in the film because I think it grounds a particular style in Scorsese's work. It demonstrates a fascination with themes that are going to recur again and again throughout his work. The American male that is compromised in some way, a person that's conflicted between religion and the desire for wealth. We're going to see a number of tensions running through the central characters that are really going to be the staple of Scorsese's cinema. The other point I want to raise is that Who's That Knocking gives us an insight into just what a very sophisticated and self-conscious experimenter Scorsese is at this early point in his career. He's a filmmaker versed in the experimentation of the French New Wave, of Italian neorealism. He's trying to identify himself as a great auteur, to use that word that was so fashionable at that period of time. He wants to be known as a great American auteur. I'm going to show you 2 very brief sequences in Who's That Knocking. I encourage you to look at the whole movie because it'll ground you in the context. But I just want you to consider the compositional sophistication and precision of the work that he's doing. 2 shots together form a relationship, and we call that in cinema studies and in production montage, right? Simply refers to a relationship between 2 images. And the first image you're looking at here is at around 5 minutes. Okay, this is going to introduce the main character. You've met him before, but here we're going to get a tighter, more comprehensive introduction to JR, played by Harvey Keitel, an extremely young Harvey Keitel who's fantastic in this film. Okay, the first thing I want to say is this is shot in a depth of field. And by that, I simply mean I can see the entirety of the space. I can see the bar on the left. I can see the contours of the bar. I can see in the 2/3 on the right of the screen the 3 central characters of the shot. Closest is JR. In the deep background is a friend who in fact anchors the depth of field. So Scorsese is interested in depicting the entire space, hence the use of a deep field to anchor that space. This recalls Italian neorealism at its most influential, and we see the influence writ large on the sequence. Have a look at this in terms of an introduction to JR's world. First, the wide shot, the depth of field, that gives us an insight into his community. And then Scorsese is going to construct, through a very simple montage relation, the psychological intimacy. This is going to be JR's movie and Harvey Keitel's movie. So here we get the first shot. Extreme wide, extreme deep focus, depth of field. This is a community. And now we get this intriguing pairing. So this is montage, two shots in relation. But what does montage actually create? Well, film theorists talk about it like this. And in fact, filmmakers, Scorsese himself included, talks about it like this. They're never just two shots. They construct a third image between the two. And what Scorsese is trying to give us here is something between the two shots. It seems to me this shot makes no sense without the preceding shot. And the contrast is what's critical. The preceding shot gives us width and depth of field. This gives us tightness on the face and tightness in framing. What's especially sophisticated, and I think here the mark of what I'm going to call a precocious vision. Notice that Scorsese doesn't opt for what's obvious. You know, you could easily go in for a close-up, and that suggests, okay, this is psychologically realistic. This is an insight into his interior self. He could do that. He could go for the close-up. But this is not a close-up. This is still a long shot. He gives us the long shot that masquerades as a close-up, and it's simply through adopting a frame within a frame. Notice here that the aperture that frames his face is a frame that exists within the wider frame of the image. We therefore have the psychological intensity of a tight shot on JR's face, but we don't have the convention of a close-up. This montage to me speaks volumes about the kind of experimentation Scorsese is going to do in this early part of his career. He doesn't want to be known as a traditionalist. In fact, he wants to eschew American tradition. He doesn't want to be known as a mainstream filmmaker. He wants to be thought of in, the great histories of the French New Wave, of Italian neorealism, and of a burgeoning American avant-garde cinema, which he wants to be instrumental in developing. I love these two images side by side because I think they speak to tensions in his work throughout his career. The desire to be individual, to be a sort of art house auteur that is always going to be associated with experimentation. And at the same time, he wants to be classical. He wants to show you the tight shot on JR's face. He wants to give you psychological intensity without using a convention that would give you psychological intensity in the most expeditious way. One other point I want to make about Who's That Knocking at My Door. The whole film is infused with this kind of experimentation. All the signature marks of Scorsese, the use of popular soundtracks, the use of restless handheld camera work, the sort of urgency of the street shot in deep backgrounds and in depths of field. You see this throughout the film. The thematic obsessions that Scorsese has with family, with church, with the American male, it's all on display here. One other theme that's going to accompany us through Scorsese's career, and I'm going to do this very quickly. He meets a woman here in the station, about to catch a ferry to Staten Island. Scorsese is going to hold this shot at great length, great duration, asking a lot of Keitelian performance. No cutting, no hiding of mistakes. Just listen to this dialogue.
So that's really a French magazine, huh?
Yes, I'm afraid it is.
Why? Now, how the hell did they ever get a hold of The Searchers?
The what?
The Searchers. It's a movie made about 11 years ago, and that picture of John Wayne is from that movie.
I don't seem to remember it.
Oh, with John Wayne. Oh, that other guy was in it, what's his name? He played Christ a few years ago in some movie,
I don't think I know it. Oh, was he Swedish?
No, American. Roland.
Recent picture?
Yeah, just a few years ago.
It's a Western.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean Jeffrey Hunter?
That's right, Hunter, right.
Yeah.
Oh, now you remember the picture.
No, I don't.
It was in color?
Nope.
No. Well, Oh, wait a minute. You know what? Natalie Wood did a small part in that picture, one of her first parts, you know. She had a big scene at the end there with Hunter, you know. She comes running down the desert over the Hunter, and she says, "On may go, Martin, go, and may go." You know, she's trying to get him to go, you know.
Oh, I don't remember it.
Well, I'll tell you, Mr. Good Picture.
Sorry.
Oh, hey, there was this one scene in that movie that was a classic. You know, the chief of the tribe, his name is Cicatrice, Spanish for scar, you know. He talks English to John Wayne, and Wayne says, "You talk good English, somebody teach you." But real nasty, you know. And then when Wayne talks Comanche to, not Comanche, but Comanche, to Scar, Scar says, "You talk good Comanche, somebody teach you," you know, but...
Sounds like a nasty fella.
Who?
Oh, the man with the
Cicatrice.
Yeah.
Spanish for scar, yeah. Oh, he was more nasty than Wayne could ever get. But then again, he was the bad guy.
Oh.
There were a lot of nasty Comanches in that picture.
Nasty picture.
So what's important? The most important part of this whole sequence, in my opinion, is the searches, John Ford's film. Scorsese is not only demonstrating this young man's desire to impress this woman with his knowledge of cinema, it's Scorsese in a deeply reflexive way attempting to demonstrate his own knowledge. This is a knowledge that brings to the front of his cinema the French New Wave, neorealism, the experimental cinema, as well as the American tradition that comes through Hollywood. I mean, he's actually trying to communicate why this film is so significant to him. I mean, if you thought Tarantino got there first, you see here the desire of a young American filmmaker to communicate his knowledge of American film history. Can you imagine a contemporary film offering so expansive account of the story of a film? It seems outlandish, and yet, if you watch Godard, for example, you see this time and again in his films, this fascination with the minutiae of pop culture and pop cinema. This is a well-known history of The Searchers. You know, it's considered a late classical film, and John Wayne's character Ethan is a compromised protagonist. Scorsese will make Taxi Driver in a few years, and I think if you look at Travis and Ethan together, you see something. You see an interesting sort of synchrony in this repressed American male. So the reason I picked this sequence and these two brief clips is to show you what Scorsese is going to bring to American cinema. And it's a history I want to trace throughout our discussions of all of his work. The tension that comes from wishing to be that great auteur, cut in the vein of the great art house filmmakers, and yet demonstrating a commitment to American cinema and to what Hollywood would become. It's a deeply sophisticated, experimental vision. And it's the kind of vision that's going to inform a great deal of American cinema throughout the 70s and 1980s.